In this video, I want to talk about managing substance abuse and addictive special interest in autistic marriages. There are marriages where one partner feels like they're slowly disappearing behind a wall of alcohol, cannabis, pornography, gaming, work obsession, gambling, collecting, online rabbit holes, and endless hyperfocus. And in many neurodiverse marriages, the neurotypical spouse eventually stops asking, "Why does my partner care more about that than me?" and starts asking something much darker. Am I emotionally alone? So today, we're going to talk about a difficult and often misunderstood topic, the intersection of autism, addiction, and addictive special interests inside long-term relationships. And I want to say this carefully right from the beginning. This is not about portraying autistic individuals as addicts. Most autistic people are not substance abusers. But when addiction does emerge in neurodiverse relationships, it often looks different, functions differently neurologically, and is frequently misunderstood by both partners. Because many addictive behaviors in autistic adults are not initially driven by rebellion, selfishness, or thrill-seeking. They're often attempts at nervous system regulation. And if couples misunderstand that distinction, they'll usually fight the symptom while missing the neurological pain underneath. So, today, we're going to decode what's really happening beneath these behaviors. We'll talk about why hyperfocus can become compulsive, why sensory overload drives isolation, how dopamine-seeking behaviors can quietly replace intimacy, and most importantly, how couples can begin rebuilding emotional safety without falling into blame and shame. Now, let's talk about why addiction is often about regulation. One of the biggest mistakes couples make is viewing addiction exclusively through a moral lens. Now, obviously, accountability matters. Harmful behaviors still create real damage, but clinically speaking, addiction is often an attempt to regulate unbearable internal states. And this becomes incredibly important in autistic marriages because autistic nervous systems are frequently managing chronic overwhelm that other people can't see. Most autistic adults live with persistent sensory overload, social exhaustion, emotional processing fatigue, chronic anxiety, shutdown cycles, internalized shame, performance masking, and difficulty recovering from relational conflict. And when the nervous system feels overloaded for long enough, the brain begins searching for relief. And the autistic brain is often especially drawn toward repetitive, predictable, dopamine-rich experiences because predictability reduces neurological chaos. That's why addictive patterns may emerge around substances, but also around highly consuming special interests. The hobby itself is not the problem. The issue is when the interest stops being enriching and starts functioning like emotional anesthesia. That's an important distinction. At first, gaming may calm the nervous system. Researching trains, military history, crypto, theology, coding, cars, survivalism, or fantasy worlds may create psychological relief. Alcohol may temporarily quiet sensory stress. Pornography may offer predictability without relational complexity. Cannabis may reduce hyperarousal. Work obsession may create structure and competence. But eventually, the regulation strategy becomes compulsive, and then the marriage begins orbiting around avoidance. Now let's talk about why neurotypical partners feel abandoned. From the neurotypical spouse's perspective, this often feels devastating because what they experience emotionally is not, "My partner's dysregulated." No, what they experience is, "My partner disappears emotionally, relationally, physically, and mentally." The neurotypical spouse may watch their autistic husband spend 6 hours researching a niche topic, but struggle to sustain a 10-minute emotionally reciprocal conversation. And over time, resentment builds, and why wouldn't it? The neurotypical partner often starts interpreting the behavior as preference. "You have energy for your hobby or your addiction, but nothing for me." And honestly, that interpretation makes emotional sense from their side. But here's where neurodiverse marriages become clinically complicated. Very often, the autistic partner is not consciously choosing the special interest over the relationship in the emotional way the spouse imagines. The special interest becomes neurologically safer than intimacy. Can you believe that? And that sentence is powerful for couples to hear because intimacy requires uncertainty. It requires emotional flexibility. It requires perspective taking. It requires repair, conflict tolerance, reading subtle cues, rapid emotional shifting. But for an overwhelmed autistic nervous system, relationships can sometimes feel neurologically expensive. So the brain retreats toward the thing that feels regulating. Unfortunately, the neurotypical spouse then experiences this retreat as rejection. And eventually, the relationship becomes polarized. The neurotypical spouse pursues connection. The autistic spouse withdraws into regulation. One partner escalates emotionally, the other escapes neurologically, and both people feel profoundly alone. Now let's talk about the dopamine-seeking brain. We also need to understand the dopamine component here, okay? Autistic brains often experience dopamine regulation differently. Novelty, repetition, predictability, mastery, collecting, categorizing, completion, stimulation, and immersion can all become highly rewarding neurologically. Now, this doesn't mean that autism causes addiction, but it does mean that some autistic individuals may become deeply locked into repetitive reward loops once the brain identifies a reliable source of regulation or stimulation. And during periods of burnout, midlife stress, relational conflict, parenting fatigue, career instability, identity collapse, the autistic brain may intensify those loops dramatically. Now, this is one reason why so many neurodiverse marriages hit major crises in midlife. The coping systems that barely worked at age 30 stop working at age 50. Masking becomes exhausting. Relational fatigue accumulates. Emotional isolation deepens. And suddenly, dopamine-seeking behaviors expand. The ASD partner drinks more. He games more. Consumes more pornography. Dissociates into hobbies. Works nonstop. Lives online. Avoids emotionally vulnerable interaction. And the neurotypical spouse ends up feeling like they're slowly losing the marriage to something invisible. Now let's talk about reframing without excusing. I want to be very clear here. Understanding the neurological root of behavior does not excuse destructive behavior. Compassion and accountability must coexist. So, if alcohol abuse is damaging the marriage, it has to be addressed. If pornography addiction is destroying trust, it has to be addressed. If obsessive hyperfocus completely eliminates emotional availability, it has to be addressed. But couples make more progress when they stop framing the issue as, you care more about your addiction than me, and instead begin exploring, what pain, overload, fear, or dysregulation is this behavior regulating? That question changes the entire therapeutic direction, because underneath many addictive behaviors is a nervous system saying, I don't know how to feel safe. And many autistic adults genuinely lack healthy co-regulation strategies because they spent decades surviving through isolation, masking, intellectualization, or compartmentalization. Now let's talk about rebuilding emotional safety. So how do couples begin rebuilding intimacy? Okay, first, the autistic partner must begin developing awareness around the function of the behavior, not just the behavior itself. The autistic spouse can ask, what happens internally right before I disappear into this? Or what emotional or sensory state am I escaping? Or what does this give me neurologically? Or what becomes intolerable without it? That level of insight matters tremendously. Second, the neurotypical spouse often needs help separating intentional rejection from neurological retreat. Again, that doesn't remove accountability, but it can reduce personalization enough for productive conversations to occur. Third, couples must replace shame with collaborative nervous system strategies, because shame almost always intensifies compulsive behavior. The goal is not merely removing the addiction. The goal is building healthier regulation pathways, and that could include sensory recovery routines, decompression rituals, reduced overstimulation, structured communication, emotional coaching, trauma treatment, addiction recovery support, medication evaluation? How about nervous system regulation work? Or maybe scheduled intimacy rituals? How about co-regulation exercises and healthier dopamine sources? And honestly, many autistic partners need to learn something they were never taught. The emotional connection itself can become regulating, but only if the relationship becomes emotionally safe enough. Now, if you're the neurotypical spouse watching this, I want you to hear something very important. You're not crazy for feeling lonely. The emotional distance hurts, and your pain deserves compassion too. But sometimes what looks like indifference is actually neurological collapse hidden behind compulsive regulation. And if you're the autistic partner listening, I want you to understand this. Your special interest may feel safe because it asks nothing of you emotionally. But intimacy requires showing up where control is incomplete. And healing often begins when both partners stop viewing each other as enemies and start viewing the nervous system itself as part of the challenge they need to navigate together. Because addiction in neurodiverse marriages is rarely just about substances or hobbies. It's about overwhelm, isolation, emotional survival, and the desperate search for relief. But with insight, accountability, nervous system awareness, and intentional support, couples can absolutely begin rebuilding emotional safety and rediscovering connection again. Now, if this video resonated with you, subscribe for more clinically grounded conversations about autism, neurodiverse marriage, emotional regulation, Cassandra syndrome, and relationship healing. And if you want support learning how to rebuild emotional safety in your neurodiverse marriage, check out the resources below in the description and pinned in the comment section. I'll see you in the next video. Would you like to schedule a paid private coaching session? This will be in the form of a face-to-face Zoom call. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this Calendly link. If you click on that link, it'll open up my calendar. You can pick the available days and times that works for your schedule. You'll get a follow-up email immediately after purchasing a session that will have the Zoom link that coincides with the day and time that you picked. I will get an email too that you scheduled a session, and I will be available on that exact day and time, and we will talk. I look forward to working with you. Hey guys, this is Mark. Some of you may not know that I have a lot of books on Amazon. So if you like my videos, you'll like my books. I have several for ASD spouses, for NT spouses, and for the neurodiverse couple. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this link. Feel free to click on that link and see what's available. I'm sure you'll find something that applies to you. So if you're struggling in your neurodiverse marriage, help is available, one click away.